You didn't leave because you were cold. You left because, in the end, you realized some things should never have to be begged for. You shouldn't have to beg to be heard. You shouldn't have to beg for peace. You shouldn't have to beg for love from someone who no longer places their heart with you. You were once patient, once tried, once believed that if you gave enough, long enough, genuinely enough, then someone would stay. But then you realized there are places where the longer you stay, the more you lose yourself. You didn't get angry, didn't argue. You just quietly closed the door that had been open for too long. And in that final silence, you chose what you once forgot: peace. Top of form. You don't need much. Just to be seen, to be understood, to be acknowledged not for what you do, but for who you are. You never demanded. You were always the first to show up. The one who kept the conversation going. The one who checked in after days of silence. You remembered every special day, every tiny detail others forgot. You brought flowers not for a mistake, but just because it was Thursday. You listened even when you were falling apart. You smiled when you had every right to stay silent. Love, to you, is action. It's presence. It's unconditional care. It's putting others before yourself, not because you're weak, but because you're sincere. You did that in relationships, in love, with friends, with family. You believed that if you were kind enough, persistent enough, patient enough, then one day, someone would come back, take your hand and say, "I see you," then. But they didn't. No one did. They got used to your presence, used to you being there, used to the little things you never asked to be returned. And then they stopped saying thank you. They stopped appreciating. They stopped seeing you as a person and only saw you as a function. The more you gave, the more you faded. The more you tried to connect, the more alone you felt. Until one day, you realized they didn't love you. They were just used to being loved by you. And the most painful thing wasn't being left behind. It was still being there, but no one really looking your way anymore. That was when you began to disappear. Not all at once, but little by little, from the inside. No one knew. No one asked. No one noticed. And you understood kindness isn't always returned with love. Sometimes, it just makes you invisible. You didn't fall apart because of a fight. There were no screams, no slamming doors, no final words thrown into the night. No one hurt you clearly. They were just silent. And then, so were you. You started pulling back. Little by little. No more good morning texts. No more asking how their day was. You stopped planning meetups. Stopped being the one to start conversations. Stopped being the one to keep the flame alive in a relationship only you were tending. And the strange thing is, no one noticed. No one asked. No one cared about the space you left behind. They assumed you were busy, that you were in your own mood, that you'd come back like every other time. But you didn't come back. Because this time, the silence wasn't a strategy. It was the truth. The truth that you were tired. Tired of holding a relationship with both hands, while the other person didn't bother to hold even one side. You weren't angry. You were just out of strength. And in the complete silence, you finally saw what you'd been avoiding. You weren't loved for who you were. You were only kept around for what you gave. The convenience, the comfort, the presence, the ease. When you stopped giving, you stopped existing in their eyes. And the most painful thing wasn't losing someone. It was realizing you never really had them. Only the responsibility you took on yourself, the expectations you created, the love you built on your own. You disappeared without a trace, because no one noticed you had once shown up with your whole heart. And that is the silent break, the kind that doesn't kill you with words, but with indifference disguised as familiarity. Top of form, that morning wasn't special. No incident, no argument over texts, no specific reason for a shift. Just sunlight slipping through the curtains like always. Coffee cooling in your hand, like every other day. But inside something had shifted. Something very small, very quiet, very certain. You looked at your screen. The contact list was still there. Familiar names. People you used to reach out to. And for the first time, you didn't choose anyone. No good morning texts. No asking if they were okay today. No coffee invites. No meetup suggestions. You weren't busy. You just wanted to know what you'd always avoided. If you went silent, who would speak? If you disappeared, who would notice? You didn't do it to test anyone. Not to blame. Not to manipulate. You just needed the truth. And the truth came faster than you thought. No one asked. No one looked. No one wondered why you suddenly went quiet. Their lives went on smooth, intact, as if you'd never been an essential part of it. At first, it was hard to swallow. A little emptiness, a little hurt, a little bruised pride. But then, relief. Because finally, you had your answer. You weren't as important as you thought. Not irreplaceable. Not held on to out of need. Just a habit. A convenience. Someone who was always there so no one considered losing you. And in that silence, you saw your true worth in their eyes, not through the words they said, but through the indifference when you no longer served the role they were used to relying on. You weren't angry. You weren't sad for long. You just started letting go. No one pushed you away. It's just that, when you stopped holding on, no one held you back. And that was enough for you to understand. It was time to return to yourself. You didn't find your way back to yourself by flying somewhere far. No beaches. No mountains. No neatly packaged healing journey, like in the ads. You just sat still. In the very room that once made you feel suffocated by loneliness, with the soft hum of the fan, sunlight slanting through the window, the quiet steam of coffee rising from an old ceramic mug, no message notifications. No packed schedule. You stopped pretending to be okay. No one left to please. No one left to hold on to. For the first time in a long time, you didn't have to be anything except yourself. You started cooking. Not for compliments. Just a simple meal. Warm and full of flavor. You picked up an old, half-read book. Turned each page. Left nothing behind. You played music, not to fill the silence, but to refill a corner of forgotten emotion. You went for a walk. No headphones. No destination. Just walking. As if each step pulled you away from the relationships that once threw you off rhythm, you slowly remembered what it felt like to be yourself, before becoming a side character in someone else's story. Before you adjusted your laugh, your words, your love, just to avoid making anyone uncomfortable. Before you strained to be worthy. Before you believed you had to make someone happy to be allowed to stay. There was no big moment. No tears. Just, day by day, you felt more at peace. Not because the world was kinder to you, but because you stopped expecting it to be. You no longer needed anyone to accept you. Because you had begun to accept yourself. Not perfect. Not easy to understand. Not needing to explain. Just real. And sometimes, just that is enough to begin again. No rush. No fear. No performance. Top of form. Bottom of form. Now, you live differently. Not as a new version, but as an old version that had been forgotten. No longer the reflex to explain everything. No longer trying to make clear who you are. What you think. What you want. What you feel. You just keep quiet. Not because you don't know how to speak, but because you don't need to be understood by those who don't listen. You no longer react. Someone misunderstands you. You let them. Someone leaves without reason. You don't chase. Someone demands more than you can give. You don't stretch yourself to meet it. Because you've learned something simple. Not every presence is worth keeping. And not every word needs a response. If something makes you doubt yourself, you withdraw. If someone makes you feel like you have to perform to be loved, you withdraw. If a relationship survives only on your effort, you withdraw. No noisy, no announcement. Just a quiet shift toward peace. You stop seeking validation. Stop posting for agreement. Stop telling your story in exchange for a few pity nods. You begin to live more privately. Not because you fear getting hurt, but because you cherish the safe space you've just rebuilt. You don't need many people to understand. Just need yourself to feel aligned. Between what you think and what you do. Between how you love and how you let go. Between the outer voice and the inner one. Now, you no longer search for who fits. You live true and let the right ones recognize you without an introduction. You're not cold. You're just clear. You're not arrogant. You just know the value of the peace you've paid dearly to keep. And ever since you chose that principle to live by, your life is no longer crowded, but no longer loud either. The world no longer knows what to do with a man like you. When you still needed to be loved, you were easy to hurt. When you still needed to be validated, you were easy to control. But when you stopped needing anything, they started getting uncomfortable. They were used to you being gentle, forgiving, easy to overlook things. They were used to you calling back, backing down, stepping aside. Now you're silent. No more explanations. No more holding on. And that's what confuses them. They call you distant, call you cold, call you someone who has changed. Oh, but the truth is, you haven't changed. You've just stopped letting them hold the strings to your emotions. You don't start fights. Don't attack. Don't speak to win. You just leave. And let your absence do the rest. Because now, you're not easily moved by a late apology. Not softened by sweet words paired with conflicting actions. You observe more carefully, more slowly, more clearly. You no longer react to silence. Because you understand, silence is also a choice. And sometimes the clearest answer, you no longer chase relationships that make you feel insecure. Not because you don't know how to love, but because you're no longer willing to trade your peace just to have someone beside you for appearance's sake. And what scares them the most isn't that you've become dangerous, but that you're no longer easily hurt, no longer easily led, no longer waiting for someone to validate your existence. A man like you who has learned how to quietly disappear from where he's not valued is a man the world can no longer control. Not because you're tougher than others, but because you've once been broken to the core and still stood back up. And from then on, you chose not to let anyone touch you with hands that don't know how to be gentle. You're not lonely. You've just stopped being willing to trade your silence for attention. No longer need noise to feel alive. No longer need small talk to fill the emptiness. Because to you, emptiness is no longer as frightening as it once was. You've learned how to sit in silence and listen to yourself. It's not avoidance. It's a kind of return whole and quiet. Others fear being alone. Fear a room with only one breath. Fear a dinner table with just one chair pulled out. Fear late afternoons with no one waiting. But you're different. You fear something else, forgetting who you are, while trying to belong in places not meant for you. Fear losing your inner voice, just to keep a conversation that's no longer real. Fear having to smile when you're not happy. Nod when you don't agree. Stay when your mind left a long time ago. Your silence isn't a sign of emptiness. It's the result of many disappointments, of many times you sacrificed yourself for something not deep enough, not lasting enough, not real enough. And when it all ended, what remained wasn't emptiness, it was clarity. Now, you sit alone and feel whole. You read not to kill time. You walk not to kill emotion. You look in the mirror and don't need anyone to confirm you're worthy. To you, peace doesn't come from applause, from late-night calls, from someone's presence only when they need something. Peace comes when you no longer feel the need to trade parts of yourself just to avoid being called lonely. You're not lonely. You've just lived enough to understand. Keeping yourself whole in a world that constantly wants you to change, that is true fullness. You don't reject love. You still believe in it. Still hope that one day someone will come gently, honestly, without rushing. But this time, if love knocks, it must bring peace with it. Not the kind of love that makes you guess, makes you strain, makes you trade pieces of yourself just to hold on. You once loved with everything, lowered your voice, shrank your dreams, shrugged off the things that hurt you just to avoid breaking a relationship, tried too hard to keep someone, even when you could no longer keep yourself. You once disappeared in someone else's story, were once the quiet shadow walking beside someone, just because you loved. Once sacrificed the truest part of yourself to fit into a shape never meant for you. But now, everything is different. Now, you don't live to be chosen. You live to never lose yourself again. If someone comes, they must come with clarity, must love you as you are, must be ready to walk beside you, not try to change, direct, or control you, because you've already paid the price, already know what it feels like to fall into confusion, not knowing who you are, in a love that only takes and never gives. You once dissolved yourself to please someone, and when they left, all you had was a distorted version of who you used to be. This time, if it can't be love with awareness, you're ready to walk away. No resentment, no holding on, just simply protecting the version of yourself you worked so hard to rebuild from the wreckage. You are the main character in your life, no longer the supporting role in someone else's story. And you will never let yourself get lost again. If you've ever felt this way, leave just one sentence: I chose peace. Oh, you are not alone. Here, there are many like you living awake, slowly, and with quiet strength.